one of the most compelling problems that you have at the moment is the arrival almost overnight in various places of tent villages or tent cities. It is a symptom. It's not the cause. But first of all, let's talk about the symptom. How are you going to address this ongoing symptom of immigration wherever it springs up? I mean, are we going to have this task force, almost like a hit squad going around to here, there and yon?
Well, what we're going to do is make sure that never again is there a situation where official Ireland can almost turn a blind eye to the development over many, many, many months of an encampment, which not only was bad from a law-abiding point of view, was also extraordinarily bad from a public health point of view.
Have you figured out why it was allowed to develop? I mean, who was not doing their job?
Well, I'll be very honest with you. I mean, when I became Taoiseach, it became very apparent to me very, very quickly that the approach from many agencies was far too siloed. This is a matter for this body, this is a matter for the other body. There's only one Ireland, and there's only one government, and I'm the head of it. And my intention as Taoiseach now is to coordinate and pull people together in relation to this. That is not the same thing. That is not the same thing as saying that tents won't arise in parts of our city or parts of our country. But it is very different when tents arrive for a relatively short period of time versus what was allowed to happen in relation to Main Street.
Okay, so the person who wasn't doing his job was the former Taoiseach?
No, not at all. I mean,
if you're doing the job now that needed to be done and someone wasn't doing their job, what's changed? You've become Taoiseach.
No, that's a slightly mischievous way of putting it, because what's actually changed is the stage that we're at in relation to migration has changed. We need to move from the emergency response to a much more sustainable model. Like when I travel around the country, and I've been doing a lot of that lately, Irish people are full of compassion, but you know what they're also full of is common sense. And what they want to see when it comes to migration policy is compassion and common sense aligning. They want us to be honest with people coming to this country about what we can and can't do. We can absolutely provide shelter, but not necessarily housing for people who come here. We can absolutely use state land and provide people with access to sanitation and help people who are fleeing persecution. But we also have to be truthful in relation to what we can do.
Is it your hope then that people, and all of them do appear to have smartphones and so on, they keep in touch with their friends, their colleagues, their families? Are you hoping that the kind of less than salubrious welcome on the map that is now available in Ireland compared to before, that they will just text and WhatsApp and whatever their friends and colleagues say, by the way, Ireland used to be great, ain't so great anymore, don't come? Is that what this is all about?
No, it's about being honest. It's about trying to have an honest and truthful discussion in relation to migration. Like, this is a country that benefits from immigration. There's no doubt about that. But and I want to see more of that happen in terms of our health service, in terms of our construction sector. But there's many ways to come to Ireland. And if you want to come economically to work here, please apply for a work permit. International protection isn't for that purpose. International protection is for people who are fleeing persecution. And what we are doing, what we're already doing, and what we'll continue to do on an almost daily basis is look at all of the levers that are at the state's disposal in terms of making sure we have a sustainable migration system. What does that mean? Well, it means things like faster processing times, because, Pat, we know this works. When Helen McEntee introduced faster processing times, as a result of this, we have seen countries that used to be amongst the highest actually fall in terms of the number of people.
Which countries are they? Because Nigeria is still high.
So Georgia is an example. Georgia isn't even in the top 10 now, and it used to be number one. Nigeria has just been added to the fast processing system in the last couple of weeks, and I expect we'll see progress in relation to that over the next few months. We have to, though, look at all of the levers, because I agree with you. Every discussion about migration can't just be about accommodation. We have obligations around accommodation. We need to do better. We need to use state land. We need to provide tents and sanitation. But actually, we also need to look at all of the various aspects of our migration policy: faster processing time, effective deportations, integrating people who have a right to be here and ensuring they can work.
What about aligning with the UK in some way? Because if most of the new arrivals are coming via the UK across the border, we are effectively mopping up their problem, unwittingly, I suppose, but that's what's happening. I mean, what needs to be done? Do we need to have ID cards so that people can be identified as having a right to be here? Because the idea of stopping a bus and looking for non-white faces and interrogating them does not seem to me to be an acceptable way to go.
No, of course it isn't. I mean, we're not in that space around ID cards, but what we are in the space of is aligning better with the European Union, making sure that we work on a European level in relation to this. I mean, Britain, and I say this with the greatest of respect, since Britain started talking tougher on migration, all that's actually happened is the number of people coming to their country illegally has increased. What we need to do is make sure that we have an effective system. I know factually, and this is the experience the world over, that faster processing times are the way. Because what you want to do here is you want to help people. This is a good country. We want to welcome people to our country. The people who have a right to be here, we want to say, yes, you have a right to be here. We want to integrate you, integrate your children, and let you make a contribution to Irish society. But the people who don't have a right to be here, they need to be asked and ensure that they leave much more quickly. And that's what faster processing gives you.
Do we have the ability to do that processing? I mean, we're talking about years heretofore. I mean, how quickly can you process someone so-called, welcome them if they're entitled to be here, or reject them if they're not? And then where do you send them? If they've come via Luxembourg or Belgium or the UK, where do you send them back to if their country of origin is well beyond the EU?
So there's a couple of parts to that question. In relation to processing times, I mean, we have increased the number of staff who are working on processing. There were about 200 staff working in the International Protection Office. We'll get that number to at least 485 this year and perhaps beyond. It is quite incredible to see the improvements in processing times despite the very significant increase in the number of people seeking to be processed. In relation to...
Well, what is an improvement? I mean, are we talking about months still?
Well, we're seeing initial decisions. We're seeing an initial yes/no within 12 weeks now for all the countries in relation to the safe country list. That is a turnaround from months and years to weeks. Yeah. So we are making real progress in relation to this. And what we also know is, and look, this is human nature. If people know that if they come to a country and they're likely to get a quicker no, they are less likely to come if they don't have a legitimate
But what about those that you were entitled to send back to the UK, over 200, and not a sinner was sent back?
Sometimes that's slightly misrepresented, and I don't mean it's misrepresented badly, but obviously there are stages of the appeals where people can legally challenge and the likes. I am satisfied that the Department of Justice is working extraordinarily hard in making sure that people who have exhausted the process and gotten a no do leave our country. But I also believe...
But that process could be years, couldn't it?
Well, it could, but we need to speed. That's why we're speeding.
So isn't that the temptation for anyone coming here who's here illegal, who's no entitled to be here? Go to the process. I'm sure you'll be here for a couple of years, and then you never know what might change. Or we might get a dig out. And
let me be very clear to anybody who is of that mindset. That's not going to happen in this country anymore, because that's why we have the safe country list. That's why we have faster processing times. But you are right. That probably was the mindset. I can come to Ireland, and I may not get a yes or a no for such a long period of time. Why would I not come? It's a great country. Why would I not come and actually try to settle in Ireland? What I'm saying to those people now is Ireland is a warm and compassionate country, but our migration policy is going to be grounded in common sense. If you don't have a right to be here, you're going to be told that much more quickly, and you're going to be asked and ensure that you leave much more quickly. And you asked me a very specific question about returns, which isn't a phrase I like because we're talking about human beings. But people who don't have a right to be here, how do we more effectively return them to their country of origin? That's why we need to pass the EU Migration Pact, because that will have specific agreements in place in relation to how you can return people. We already have many return agreements in place at an Irish and an EU level.
Do you have... Are you a bit unhappy with the NGOs who are giving tents to people? And that is, after all, their remit, to give people shelter who have no shelter. But people can be shipped out to Crooksling, decide they don't like it there, their tent has been destroyed, they get another tent from an NGO.
No, I'm not unhappy with charities who are going about doing their very best to provide humanitarian assistance. What I am frustrated about is the siloed system in relation to migration policy. And I'm about 34 or 35 days as Taoiseach of this country, and I'm absolutely determined that we get a grip of this. And what does a grip of this mean? It means that we actually have a system that people in this country understand, and a system in this country that people who come here understand, that we have a coordinated response, that we don't just every day talk about accommodation or tents, but we also talk about the social welfare system and how that interacts. We talk about accommodation costs and what's a fair contribution somebody should make towards accommodation when they have status, that we talk about a consistency of approach to people from Ukraine. This country's done a huge amount for Ukraine. We're so proud of that. But we need to have a consistency of approach. It shouldn't be whether you came 1 month or not, that you get a different level of support.
So is it going to change after this memo goes to Cabinet tomorrow?
It's certainly my intention that we will see changes in a number of areas that do inject what I think Irish people, I believe, has been lacking which is that common sense approach. We want to be, let me be really clear, we are a compassionate country. We want to help people, but we also want to know that the system is fair. And therefore, I think we need to look, yes, at welfare consistency. We need to look at a contribution that people who have status should make to accommodation. We need to look at making sure that anybody in work is working legally, that there are more workplace inspections. I think there's a number of common sense things that we should do, but crucially, we need to work at a European level, because this is not an Irish challenge. When I go abroad and meet other European prime ministers and go to the European Council, this is an issue that every country is grappling with. Migration is a good thing. What is not a good thing is not having a consistent, coherent approach to it.